This is our October edition of Kaffeeklatsch mit Wissenschaft, once again in English due to popular demand. We also host events in German every now and then, but today we have Marta here and it's going to be in English, and I already know that a lot of family members are joining from Spain, which I think is amazing, and I'm really glad that we can still bring this format to you in like digital space, and that so many people from outside of Berlin can join this way too. And yeah, Bonnie already talked a little bit about it. Kaffeeklatsch mit Wissenschaft has existed at the museum for over a year now, and it's growing, and it's just an exciting way to learn about what scientists do and what cool research that scientists do, especially in Berlin. And Marta is also a researcher in Berlin, and we've met like last year, I think, through Soapbox Science.
Well, we actually met in 500 Women Scientists.
That's true.
Earlier.
Yeah, that's earlier than that.
But we connected more in Soapbox
That is
Science.
true. Yeah. So we've been connected for a while, and I think the work that she does is really cool, and that's why I annoyed her and said she has to come and join. It's like, you have to come and join Kaffeeklatsch mit Wissenschaft, and I'm really excited that she's here today and is going to talk over coffee about her work. If you have a coffee yourself, then definitely come and drink with us. We like to see you. And yeah, if you want to turn the cameras on so we can look at you, that's fine with us too, right? You can see us, we can see you. And I think every now and then I'm going to drink coffee and have some cookies, but I think maybe before that we're going to get started. And I already have a few questions for Marta. Oh, our screen disappeared, I think. Okay. We have 3 questions for Marta already before we like get into your your slides. You're ready. So I have a few like standard questions that I always like to ask, because I know that people are super interested in that. And it's, how did you even end up in science? Like, do you have family members that are also scientists, or was it just something completely new to your family?
So there are no real like scientists, researchers in that sense. Like there are a lot of doctors, but medical doctors. So like my parents or my grandpa was also a doctor. I have an uncle that is also a doctor. So that was like some science was there, but not research itself. So I actually never thought I wanted to be a researcher. So
did you want to be a doctor?
Actually, it crossed my mind a little bit, but I kind of was never drawn into that in the same way as now. I have several cousins studying to become doctors, so that next generation is getting ready.
I see.
So,
Okay.
yeah, no, so there was like not real, and actually I don't know how I ended up here. How I ended up doing research was a bit of more because of the place where I wanted to do my master's thesis than anything else. So like during my bachelor, I couldn't do Erasmus, so I said, when I do my master, I want to go abroad. And I went to visit a friend that was doing Erasmus in the Netherlands and say, here's the place where I want to come. So when I got to the moment to choosing what to do for my master thesis and my internship, I started emailing people in the Netherlands here and there, regardless the topic. I was like, I want to go there. And at some point I got an email from a research institute to do 4 months there. I was like, perfect. I went there, and basically by working with this PhD and in this institute in the Netherlands, Institute of Ecology, is how I kind of connected to research, because before I was mainly an applied person. I didn't really was drawn to, I never thought I would do a PhD or things like that. So.
Okay, cool. So you're the first one. And actually, where are you from, or where's your family from? And you mentioned you did a bachelor and master's, and your master's you did abroad, but what did you do for your bachelor's? And then what did you study for your master's? So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so my bachelor was in environmental sciences in Madrid. And then for my
And you're from Spain?
Yeah, I'm from Spain. So I'm from Spain, from Madrid. And I did all my studies there. Which was, perfectly cool and fine, staying with my family and friends, and also we have very interesting programs. And I did for my master's. Then I knew I had one course during my bachelor that was restoration ecology, and I kind of like it because it was not conservation. It was like, okay, this place is degraded. What can we do with it? And it was very, how do you say? So it was not purely biological, but also like in restoration, you need to take into account like who lives around or what kind of ecosystem is there, what other actors want. So it was not only pure biology, but also you had to interact and negotiate and so on. So I found it super cool. And I found a program in Madrid that was restoration ecology, basically, simple, with different universities. And that's what I ended up doing. Although for some time, because I also love the sea, like some of my family comes from the north of Spain. So I also thought of like doing something related to diving that I like a lot. And I went actually with my mother to check one of these fairs that the universities bring programs on. And I found one in Australia that I really love. But then my parents were like, do you really need to go that far?
It is very far. I can relate. My parents are like that too.
So in the end, I did it in Madrid, but then my master thesis, I did it abroad in the Netherlands. And that's when my journey to the living abroad started.
And in Amsterdam or?
No, it's a small town. It's basically a student town. It's called Wageningen.
Okay.
So it's very famous because of the university, and also this research institute is there. So basically, if you work in agriculture or environmental science, aquatic ecology, probably you have heard of that. But until I got contacted by this researcher, I had never heard of that place. But I said like, oh, that sounds cool.
As long as it's abroad, I'll do it. All right. And did you ever think you would end up in Berlin? Was that something that was on your mind? Oh, yeah, Germany is a good place to do research. I want to go there. Or did you just come here for your PhD and that kind of just, happened? Or was it your plan?
No, it was definitely not my plan. So actually after in the Netherlands, I not only did my master and my master thesis and intensive, then I got hired. I was working as a research assistant there.
Right.
So I stayed in total like 1.5 years more or less. It was awesome. But then at some point I said like, I would like to give it a try in Spain. So I moved back to Spain, and it was not as easy. Let's say, to readapt and to also find a job in science. So I ended up working at a very cool place in a toy store.
Nice.
That was very fun because it had all these gadgets and robots and so on, but it was not what I wanted. And then I got an offer via the Netherlands. Someone sent me a PhD offer. And I applied to it, and I got to the last interview, but I didn't get chosen. So actually, my now boyfriend is the one who got that position.
No. Is he watching right now?
Yes. So I don't know if he's happy. But well deserved. He was much better for this position. But then the boss later on contacted me again saying, I have this project, I really like you. Do you want this position? So I like, oh, that sounds interesting. And it's like, has a lot of field work and so on. Yeah, so it was a bit like, I didn't plan to come to Berlin, but I had heard of this researcher, and I knew some people, and I always wanted to come to Berlin to visit. So I think everybody wants to come to Berlin to visit.
Pretty cool here.
So in the end, when I got this offer, I said like, let's go for it.
Yeah.
So it was like not a plan. It kind of happened.
But you're happy with your decision?
Yes, I'm happy.
Okay. Yeah. And so you mentioned a little bit about what you've done before, and obviously the field work aspect drew you in a little bit, right? Because you said, oh, there's like field work and stuff. So have you always wanted to work with your research studies? I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about what you do in a minute, but have you always wanted to work with like algae and aquatic plants and all that, or is that just something that also, because I know people, when they have an idea of what to do in a PhD, it's not always what they end up doing. But is that something that you were always interested in that research field? Or was that something you just learned to love over time?
I think it was a little bit of both, to be honest. So I always loved plants. And I will tell I have like a little bit about that in my, later I will mention it in the presentation, but so I wanted to work in plants, but I was never, like when we were doing projects during the bachelor especially and so on, we were always like, in the team of people I was working with, I was always the one with forest and plants, but other people were the one with aquatic ecosystems. So I was never that. So it was thanks to going to the Netherlands when I started to like mix these two, like my love for plants and then to discover these aquatic ecosystems. So actually I didn't know, like after my master thesis, then is when my love developed. So for my PhD, exactly not everything about my topic was clear. Like some parts I was like, what's this? But it was with plants, it was with lakes, and it was like about understanding how things work. So I was like and something that can in the future be applied for restoration ecology. So it was kind of in a way connected still with
your bachelor's, right? That's
with my bachelor and my master, exactly. So
cool. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you actually do now, do your PhD. Bonnie, do we display our bildschirm? Yeah. Okay. Bonnie is our wonderful support whenever I have questions. She's there for me. Let's see if that works. All right, you have the clicker. Let's see if it works. I love the first slide already.
Great. So I want to say also one thing in Spanish. Si queréis preguntar algo, lo podéis poner en español en el chat y yo lo puedo leer para la gente de España. Si entendéis algo.
Creo que sí.
Yeah, a bit. Quizá Franzi puede traducir también. Okay, so I want to start then with the presentation. So as I mentioned before, when I was talking about like my love for plants, as you can see, and for nature, it comes from long back. So here is the little one, my brother, that's me, and my grandpa, that he was always like, he's in love with, he was also working a lot in the garden and plants and so on. And we were actually doing a bit the opposite. He was like planting something and we were like destroying his beautiful work. But through that, his patience, we grew it a little bit, and also through my mother, she also loves plants. And then also as I was in a scout group, that also made me appreciate a lot nature and like be very in contact with that and trying to take care of nature and try to take care of the world we have. Like I really learned a lot and met awesome people. And yeah, as you see with my family, we all are kind of connected to nature.
Yeah. It's so cool. I never met someone who was in the Scouts.
Really?
Yeah.
I think we are everywhere, but we don't always say it. But then when someone mentions it, it's like, oh yeah, I was also in the Scouts. Yeah, so let's see. So I always thought that I would end up working with forests, like something related to nature. But it didn't turn out exactly how I thought. So I ended up working in forests, but under the water. So I'm mentioning now forest and so on, and I want to explain a little bit like, so forest, like we all know how forests look like, what there are in the forest. So we know there are trees, and there are animals, insects, and then trees do photosynthesis, and then they take CO2 and then oxygen for us and for animals, and then animals also eat little plants, and some animals eat other animals, and then they poo, and then it's decomposed, and then it's nutrients for the trees. So it's like a whole equilibrium, complex system that everything is connected. So, and that's like super amazing, because sometimes we tend to see things individually, but like every little thing has some meaning. Even annoying mosquitoes probably have some meaning.
Yeah.
Although I still wonder about
it's hard to admit, but it's true.
Yeah. So as I said, what I study are actually forests, but under the water. And here there's like, well, these amazing illustrations by Rachel Ignatowski. And here's the forest under the water, where we see that there are also like plants, and the same as in the other occasion, they also do the photosynthesis, and they bring oxygen to the water that also fishes and other insects need, and then fishes eat algae, or they eat other animals. So like the whole thing is also connected also to the, and then also between the terrestrial, so the forest and above the water and not the water. So everything is kind of complex and connected, which I find it like super cool. Because then you need to really think in a more open way. You cannot just focus on something, but you can focus, but then you also need to kind of see the big picture. So I'm talking a lot about plants and algae. So here it comes, let's see how it works, but it's a kind of, when I introduce you my assistant, first of all, she's been with me already in a few presentations. She's Frau Elodea.
Oh, I like her.
So, and here I'm talking about the plants and algae and so on, and we tend to think that under the water, everything is algae. So I'm gonna make like a small test. I brought some photos of things that grow under the water. And also for you, the people that are watching this, you don't need to write it, but think about what they are. And I will give the solution. So now you have to check these pictures, number 1 and 2, and you have to tell me if it's algae or plant.
Oh God, is that a trick? Is that a trick question?
course, there's gonna be tricks. I mean, that's the point.
Okay.
So everybody thinking about it. I mean, it's okay. What do you think?
So I think the first one is a plant.
And the second?
Algae.
So it's actually the other way around.
No.
But good one. So that's also that's a trick, because the number one also it does look like a plant. It has like branches and like a stem and so on. So it's what we call a macroalgae, because it's like a not this microscopic one, but like a big one. And the other one is plant. Actually, it's the same species as my little assistant.
Oh right, I was thinking that it looked like familiar, but
they resemble a little bit. Okay, so I got more. Next one. Here, again, this in theory should be a little bit easier, I hope.
Yeah.
So 3 and well, there's a 4 there. What do you think?
So I think 3 is a plant, and 4 is algae. Oh, also a plant.
Yes.
Yeah.
So both of them are plants.
One tricking us.
Nufer, and the other one is it's the other one. We can find it here in lakes all over Germany for sure. It's Potamogeton perfoliatus. If someone is interested in Latin names, it always sounds so cool. And the last one, I promise. Here we have also 2. These are 2 different ones.
Ah, okay. So they're not the same.
No. So one is the one on the bottom is one, and the one on the corner with a 6 is another one. Algae or plant?
Yes, algae.
Both?
So the 5 is algae. Oh, you're so quiet. I don't know.
okay. I don't want to put you now.
So I also studied biology, but none of like that.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like this exactly is not my expertise, but this comes with a trick. So actually, number 6 is algae. Those are algae, but augmented like with a microscope. So actually, if you see that in the lake, you don't see it. Like if there's a lot of that, then you see that the water is a bit turbid or a bit maybe greenish or brownish. And the number 5 is actually not plant nor algae. It's cyanobacteria.
I saw that before and was like, I saw this before, but if I saw this before, it's probably algae. But of course, yeah.
So it's actually also people know them as blue-green algae.
Yeah.
So that also kind of is a bit misleading, but they are bacteria, and they are the ones that causes this what we call algae bloom, or not only but also, and this especially these light green ones that look a bit.
So I've seen them in lakes many times.
Yeah, usually in standing waters with a lot of nutrients and so on, it happens, and usually they release some toxic substances that I think they are not lethal, at least here, but you might get your stomach a bit upset if you, or your pets also.
All right.
But let's not talk about sad stories. Let's continue. So then the question is like, okay, I've been telling you this is plant, this is algae, plant, algae. But what is the difference? So I had to actually go back into my studies like a long time ago, because I was like, what is actually the difference? Like, what if people ask me like, please tell me the difference? What is the difference? So I actually talked to a friend also about this, and the thing is like algae is like a word that is a bit abstract, because it comprises not only like people, organisms from different kingdoms. You know that there are kingdoms like fungi, plant, animalia, protista, archaea, and so on. So algae are both in protista, so the ones that are unicellular and so on, and in plants. So algae are actually also plants. But the difference then within the plant kingdom is that plants have usually more complex structures, like the tissues, like if you take a macroalgae, so the first one that you thought it was a plant, and you squeeze it, for example, you will see that stem, that part will go completely flat, because the structure is very simple, and then loses all the water inside, and then it's like, okay, this is macroalgae. Okay. But if you take a plant and you squeeze it, this time I couldn't bring, and also for people they couldn't touch it, but I wanted to bring a plant so you can touch it and see that it's like actually this one, Enoidea. So basically it's a structure, but many functions, especially the macroalgae and the plants in the water, are very similar. The function they have, what they do for the ecosystem or in the ecosystem. So now that I've been talking about the plants, so much about the plants and the macroalgae and so on, now that we have learned to distinguish them, hopefully, why are they so important and why am I studying, or people study them? So the same as forests and trees have this super important role. We know that when you cut a whole forest, then usually if it rains a lot, the whole land goes, like the soil goes. So here also the macrophytes, macrophytes, sorry, I'm using this word, but macrophytes or aquatic plants are kind of the same. So macrophytes is aquatic plants, but I'm used to using this word and it comes just naturally. So sorry if I
might remind you every now and then.
So macrophytes
has
is aquatic plants and macroalgae, both of them.
Okay.
But I will try to use aquatic plants, and it's not like I using weird words there. So basically, they also grow roots. Like some of them can be floating, but some of them grow roots into the soil, so they also hold it. So if there are like waves or a storm or whatever, then the soil doesn't get mixed in the water and then it's super turbid, and then the light doesn't go through, and then it's bad for the plants and the fishes and so on. So that's one of the functions.
I see.
And also, since they grow, they can act as kind of wall, so if there are waves, and it happens also in the sea, for example. In the sea, there are also plants growing, actually some that look like grass, but big grass. And they have seen that it's super important, they function when there are like storms and tsunamis, because they can actually lower the impact of the tsunamis if there are plants. So it's actually super cool. And of course, the same as in the forest, the plants here, they work for like fishes to hide there, or insects, or for example, they can lay their eggs, snails, insects, or insects that grow, that are in the leaves, and then the fishes eat those insects. And like, so it's like a forest. I mean, it's just like a forest. It's very...
It sounds just like it, yeah.
But it's super important to keep the water quality in a good state, because when the plants are gone, usually what happens is that it's full of the small algae, so that is called phytoplankton, and it's usually like there's not enough light, so many plants die, and it's usually, I mean, you cannot drink it obviously, but also not like this, but the visibility is bad, many fish species can also not survive, so it's like, it's pretty good to have the plants. So, and as I said before, like all plants, whether they're underwater or above the water, they have similar needs. They need nutrients to grow, they need light to do the photosynthesis, they need water in different ways, so under the water, obviously, but also the
provided.
So here we have like some, like the plants that we all have, like in our balcony or when we go to a forest, like all of them, they need light, nutrients, also depending on the temperature, they go to sleep in winter, so like all those things are similar to what happens under the water. And the same as they have needs, they also suffer stress. Same as us, actually. They can also suffer stress, but in a different way. So here, for example, I put a photo of like a plant that the stress is obviously that doesn't have water. So obviously the plant is not very happy. But on the other side, I put a photo of an aquatic plant. And this plant, what's happening is like, obviously the water is pretty turbid, pretty dirty. And if you see carefully, I don't know if you can see it on the leaves, it's like something brown right there.
Yeah, you can see it.
So what happens there is that then the plant, if the water is turbid because there's algae, a lot of algae, probably because there are a lot of nutrients. And there's also something growing on the leaves. So what means is that then the plant doesn't get light. I mean, it's basically if you take a plant from your home and you put a blanket on it, what will happen? Even if you don't put it all the time, like the plant is not gonna be very happy, like, hey, what is my son, you know? So this blanket that I'm talking about is called Periphyton. So here I need to use a technical word, because there's not friendly user word for this one. But I will call it also sometimes blanket.
Blanket is good.
Because this can be also, so it's normal to find this. So this is basically what's Periphyton. So Periphyton, that we see it growing here around this plant, is basically a mix of algae and bacteria and stuff that grows on surfaces, so any surface. And my mother, for example, gave when she was explaining what I was doing here in Berlin to my cousins and my family, she gave a really good definition. So she says like this mucus, or this slimy thing. Yeah. That it grows like on the rocks, like when you go to a lake and it's like
and you slip and you crack your head open.
Or you touch it. I hope you don't crack your head open.
No, but I've slipped on those before.
Yeah. But under the water, so not the moss that is above, but under the water is like a mucus, and sometimes you touch it and it's like, ooh,
Ooh.
So basically that grows also on plants. And what happens is like, if it grows some, I mean, that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you stand in the water for one day, probably it will grow on your feet. So like, because they are floating usually, and then they get attached, and then they multiply there, they get light, they get nutrients, so they also do photosynthesis and so on. So in a small quantity, it's okay. But if it starts growing and growing so much that the plant doesn't get enough light, maybe initially will be fine. Like, okay, I get a bit of light, I can grow a little bit, but not enough light to be super happy. And then winter comes, they die, but then the next year it tries to grow again from seeds, but not enough seeds were produced last year because there was a lot of Periphyton, but Periphyton is growing already. And year after year after year, it might trigger and what happened that at some point the plants are gone. So what I'm trying to understand is like, what's happening with Periphyton? Why is Periphyton growing? What is it connected to nutrients? Is it connected to fishes? So as I say, Periphyton is algae. So also it needs light to do the photosynthesis and grow. And also I'm wondering, like, does temperature also affect, like temperature in the water? Does it affect how much grows, if it grows more or less? Also the nutrients that are in the water, or if the plant releases some nutrients. And then also on the plants, insects crawl and go up and so on, and some of them they eat the Periphyton also. So, and then some fishes eat those insects. And so it's like, I'm trying to understand all this whole network, let's say, the kind of social network around the plants. And what is more important, because in the future, like if we see that plants are disappearing because of this, I mean, this is very complex. It's not only because of Periphyton, but Periphyton might accelerate the process or actually be the thing that clicks and makes the plants disappear. And also can be the reason why after a lake is, again, I don't know, the nutrients are in a good balance and so on, and the water is kind of clear enough, why plants take very long to come back. It can be also because this algae is growing on the first ones that are trying to come. So even if there are seeds or tubers, the tubers are like the potatoes. Some plants have these kind of potatoes under the, like on the soil, and they grow from there. So maybe the first one tries to grow, and then Periphyton grows, and then it's like,
I see.
Sorry, but you don't get enough light because I get it for myself. So, and might delay the process of a lake going back to a nice state. So I'm trying to understand this whole thing. And exactly as I say, I want to know how this affects aquatic plants. So a lot of research has been done in some lakes for how they affect the plants when they disappear in the process of disappearance, but not so much in the later process of after restoration of a lake. We have seen that the plants just don't come back immediately, and it's like, okay, you have enough sun, you have proper amount of nutrients, there are seeds, so what's going on? And this topic, Periphyton, has been kind of not so researched, let's say more ignored. So actually, when I was doing my master thesis, the PhD I was working with, he was studying the plants, the aquatic plants. And we need to know the biomass. And usually you grab it and it was like covered with, but this slimy thing. I was like, ugh. And I was like, what should I do with this? I didn't even know how it was called. I was like, algae. So it's like, nah, just clean it and try to remove it. So it was like, this is not even important, like to consider.
Right.
So it's kind of funny that for me was initially something very annoying. Like, made for the plants is also annoying.
That's funny.
So now I want to tell a little bit about how it's like the process has been for me, not in general, but has been for me to do research. So the first part is the planning, like to design the experiment, but also to think of like where we're gonna sample. So I don't know if you see the blue dots. So I kind of did two experiments into different types of lakes. So one is Müggelsee, that is the biggest lake here in Berlin. But probably for the Berliners, you know this lake. And then the other lakes are in the north of Brandenburg and in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. Oh my God, I always struggle to say this one, so this was my big moment. So basically I plan, and like in my first year, or I studied Müggelsee, but I also studied these other ones that you have to go and visit them to see if it's where to put experiments and so on. And then the second part is to build what you're going to install.
Oh.
Because what I was doing is like installing experiments inside the lake. I will mention now something also, because I use these cages to hang inside some plastic that I will show in the next slide. I have a photo. I maybe should have put it here, but I use it to put this plastic because, as I said, this algae, this Periphyton, gets attached to anything. So it's much easier than to take a plastic strip to the lake, to the lab, and remove this algae if I want to measure, than taking a plant, how you shake it, maybe the leaf breaks, whatever. So then this is a kind of way to approach it. So this is how science is done. And also, I say it's time to get creative, because usually like you are short in budget, or you have something that in the past someone has used for an experiment and you want to reuse it. So to be also a bit efficient. So this is actually in my institute here in IGB, that is in Müggelsee. So the one on the corner down there, on the right corner, is the ones that we put inside Müggelsee. And actually it has, now it's something they do every year. So it has kind of outgrown my PhD, and it's still sample, which is cool to have long-term information. But let's move ahead. So then I have to go to the lakes and install experiments. So the plastic strips I talked about are those. So as you see
on the top left,
yeah, those are the strips that I hung inside those cages that you see in both, like on the bottom. So on the bottom left is the ones in Müggelsee, and the bottom right is the ones I had in Brandenburg. That I had to put more but smaller. And I mean, basically what I'm using is office clips, and like you really get very creative when you do these things. And then after that, you leave it there for some time, because like to see the algae to get attached, like 2 weeks, 1 month, depending on how you have planned the experiment and how often can you go to sample. And then after that, you have to go to the lake and take them. And here you can see a few photos of like how it looks like after a month, for example.
Oh, wow.
Or like the one in the center on the bottom, that's, for example, experiment in Müggelsee. So I hang it, I build a frame, and I hang it inside the cage, and with the clips, that is actually what we can actually see from here. We see the paper clips. I leave them there from April till September, and I go every 2 weeks and I take one of those strips and I see how it's accumulating.
I see.
But in the other lakes, it was every month, and you see how it looks like you go by boat, or for example, here's when dry suits are very, very helpful, because then it was like too close to the shore to go by boat, but too deep to go with normal waders of fishermen.
I see.
So with that one, I'm like a balloon, so I could float. I mean, I could like not too deep because it can get dangerous, but I could float, get my strips, and I float back to the shore.
That sounds great.
So it was kind of funny. And then after that, of course, you store them and you bring them to the lab. And as you see, we use high technology, meaning a toothbrush and a recycled Tupperware.
Oh, yeah.
But it's basically, I mean, we don't need more. And then I remove the algae from the plastic, and then I
with the toothbrush.
With the toothbrush, and with water from the lake, with filtered water from the lake. And then with that, I can measure like how much algae had grown and for how long. I can measure the nutrients that are inside. You can also measure like how much light they can absorb, like using other devices and so on. So with a simple strip, you can actually get a lot of information. A lot is super cool. And then what's the next step in research? The next step is thinking.
Data? No, I love that.
I love this meme.
Yeah, me too.
It's like, I mean, basically it's like, oh, I think this is happening. This is cool. Okay, you check your data? No. Sorry, but no. So basically the steps that come later is like, check your data, see that everything is all right, to the proper right statistics. That is usually I find a step that is very not so easy, because you say, this test is cool, but then it's like, no, you have to consider so many things, like you really need an expert. Then read other publications about the topic, discuss with other scientists, because I think that's actually super important, like to the part lesson with the conferences. The part of discussing with other people, like bringing other ideas, question the ideas you have. Like we have like to be open to these discussions. Like I hate when some scientists are like stuck on their kind of throne or idea, and no, it's like science move forward when we think together. So I find it very cool. And then it comes the part of publishing. I'm not gonna get into that, but it's a nightmare. I haven't published.
Thanks for saying it, so I don't have to.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like it's a terrible system. So if any of you is interested, look it up because it's crazy. I'm just saying because it's something we need to fight against.
Yeah.
And yeah. So basically, the conclusions I've gotten, because I've told you a little bit about what how I did this, but I thought like kind of makes sense to tell you a little bit conclusions I have found so far. So we know that for sure. The shading, this Periphyton gives to macrophytes. I put macrophytes there, sorry. It's what I'm used to. But like basically, if you put a blanket on macrophytes, it will be bad. I mean, it's something that you might say, it's obvious, but it's not so obvious. And then when studying what actually affects the Periphyton, like is it the light, is it the temperature, is it the insects that eat these this Periphyton, what I found is like there's not one thing that you say like it would be awesome, right? Because you say it's the temperature or it's the insects, and then you just have to go to that. But actually, it's good to know because then you know that this is more complex than addressing only one thing. Like okay, we address the fishes and that's it. No, like you need to consider the Periphyton when you plan restoration of a lake, or when you see that a lake is degrading. Periphyton can actually be, if you see that a lot of Periphyton is growing, can be a sign of like, okay, something is going on in this lake, something bad is happening here. So it's kind of cool. Like it's very annoying when you're swimming, a bit disgusting, I would say, but it can have some science value there. And then I want to talk a little bit about like, this has been kind of my research. So I'm now gonna jump into something that is not my expertise, but I thought it was very interesting. So there's a project that some of my friends have worked in, and I think since we're in Berlin, it's a bit interesting to talk about how water works here. So there's apparently a saying that is like, in Berlin there's little water, but a lot of water bodies. So water bodies are like lakes, rivers, like any surface water. And that's not very intuitive. Like you would think, like, okay, we have a lot of water, but the problem is that the water doesn't flow much in Berlin for different reasons. Can be dry, it can be flat, and so on. So in Berlin, we have what it's called a semi-closed water cycle, which means you're at home, you take a shower, right? And then take a shower, and the water goes through the sink, goes down the pipes to the wastewater treatment plant, where the water is clean and so on, and then once it's clean, it's back into the lake or the river. But since the water doesn't
flow, straight into the lake after it's been like processed, really?
Yeah.
Wow. See,
it's clean enough. Okay, I have to clarify, this is not my field of expertise, this I studied in my bachelor, but it does go back because it's good enough.
Right, yeah, okay.
But since the water doesn't flow that much in Berlin, it flows but very slow. What happens is that some of that water that is taken back to our apartments or kitchens or whatever is water that had gone already through that cycle. So it's not new water that is coming from the rivers upstream and so on. It's water that we are kind of reusing. That is why it's called semi-closed, because some water is new, but some water is kind of reused. So then I think this is kind of cool. But then we really have to be careful that we take care of the water we have, of our ecosystems and macrophytes in this case. And I wanted to talk about one kind of fun thing that I learned about the Spree. Spree, for the ones that are not from Berlin, is the river that crosses the city. When there's not much rain, so like in summer and there's drought and so on, it might happen, that's why I say it's a free spirit, so usually it flows from Müggelsee, that is in the bottom right corner, the big lake there.
That big one.
It flows diagonally up towards kind of the circle there, let's say. That's a Spree. So usually it flows in that direction. But what happens when there's a lot of drought? That the river flows backwards.
Oh.
So sometimes in summer, the river Spree flows back to
Müggelsee. Really?
Yes. So it's something that is probably, the river was free flowing, so without dams and so on probably won't happen. But it's a river that has dams upstream and so on, and downstream. So it's actually quite, I was like, this is crazy. I read it on the news and I was like, this cannot be. So
No.
I started talking with people in my institute in IGB, and it's like, yeah, of course it happens. And I was like, okay, this
of course it happens.
I mean, it had to be. I mean, it's a Berliner, so
Bro,
it's like,
I was just thinking that we just do whatever we want here.
Exactly, it's a free town, free city, like, so even the river does whatever it wants. And then one more thing that I read recently was this this report was published. So this is not so fun. This is maybe a bit of a sad note, but like, is this Living Planet Index? So it's an index that is for all ecosystems, but they have also a section for freshwater ecosystems. So freshwaters are whatever is not a sea, basically, whatever is not, so like lakes and rivers. And in this report, in the general report, they said that there has been an average decline of 68% of the populations of mammal, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish that they have studied between the 1970 and 2016. So decline. Much. So they have studied some populations. So of course, when you do research, you cannot monitor the whole Earth, every single individual, but it's kind of a big study. This is available online if anyone wants to check it. But they have seen that the worst case is freshwaters. Like the decline is 84% of this population. So they don't study insects, for example, or that probably I tried to find that information, but I couldn't. But there has been a dramatic also decrease of the insects in the water. And the insects in the water, like they eat the Periphyton, or some fishes eat the insects, or like so they are also important. So, but this is not only bad news. I mean, it's bad news, but since we know, it's our chance to act and do something. So there are now a lot of movements for free-flowing rivers, like, because sometimes putting dams also, sometimes not, by putting dams for like hydropower and so on, has a huge impact on the biodiversity, on the fishes, on the insects, on the whole river, whatever. So there's like, and usually the impact that it has compared to the energy that provides is usually not good, especially the small ones. There's research that shows that the small ones are the ones that have the highest impact and provide the least energy. So it's actually, so there are a lot of things we can do. We can act, we can look for information, like the people that have joined this today is already doing something, is learning about this. So I think it's important that we act. Like, okay, it has declined, we know it, we have this information, so let's do something. So it's bad, but at the same time, it's like,
you have the data,
we have information, we have power, let's do something. And with this, more or less, I want to end. But this slide, I was gonna put it earlier, before, like I was gonna put it after the step of like discussing and publishing and so on, as another step within science. Because I think that science is not only about scientists, for scientists, and so on. Science, it has to be for the people, with the people, if we want our science to have an impact. And that's why I think that events like today, like Café Klatsch, Müggelsee, or Soapbox Science, that we are part of the organizing team, both of us.
It's a good picture of us too, that group picture. I love that picture.
Yeah. So this was a couple of weeks ago in our last event. So it's super important that we, as scientists, try to speak a language that people can understand, make the effort to go to the streets, to talk to people, and especially nowadays that we are seeing that there's so many fake news and so many crazy things are going on, is even, I think, even more important that we go there and we tell the truth and we get questioned by the people. But saying, because sometimes it's like, okay, we get so focused in our field that we're like, what's the point? What's the big picture? What's not that we have to adapt to everything, but it helps to see what actually matters. And with this, I also wanted to end saying that besides what I just said, I also want you to take some message home. One is like, I hope that after my talk, you love aquatic plants a little bit, that you know that what's underwater is not only algae, but also algae. And next time you go to a lake and you see the plants and you're like, oh my God, this is so annoying for swimming and so on. Okay, they are annoying, I admit it, and some even scratch a little bit, but they have an important role, and now I hope you can see them with a little bit more love next time.
Oh yeah, that you said that so sweetly, because I think that will 100% be me, because I'm not a huge fan of swimming in lakes, because I'm always like, get startled by whatever touches me.
Yeah.
And Also, I don't think you lived here yet. That was many years ago. Someone, which also made me suspicious of Berlin lakes. Someone had like a snapping turtle that they couldn't take care of anymore, and they just put them in like Müggelsee. And a little kid was attacked by a snapping turtle, and I was like, I'm never going in a lake again.
And you're telling me that, well, luckily my research is done.
I didn't want to tell you at the beginning of the talk, you know. But yeah, I think they caught it.
But maybe that's why they made this movie, High Alarm and Müggelsee. Have you watched it? No. So High Alarm and Müggelsee, High is shark.
Yeah.
So there's a horrible movie, it's horrible, but it's about like sharks in the lake I study.
In Müggelsee.
Highly recommend it. No, I haven't watched it yet because it's in German, but now that I know I speak German a bit, I can watch it. So.
That's great. We should like make a Soapbox Science movie night. Oh, yeah. You know, we stream it and then we talk about all the things that are wrong about it.
Ah, that would be cool because we're actually quite some aquatic scientists.
We have a lot of in
Soapbox Science. So.
It's true, yeah.
I'm behavioral scientist, animal scientist, so yeah. I mean, we all have something to say.
So if someone's seen this movie, please use the chat to let us know if it was any good. And if you have questions, you can also already put them in the chat too. I have some of my own questions, of course, because you know me, I always have questions. And so please feel free to like let us know if you want to be unmuted or if you want to just write your questions in the chat. But so I think one of my questions was something that you pretty much already touched on and explained, but I'm gonna ask your opinion again of why is it so important to study. I think on the IGB website it was called like regime shifts. Do you want to briefly explain what that is and how it affects what that means to you for your work?
So regime shifts is a theory that was developed, I don't know, 30 years ago. No, not that much, but it's for shallow lakes mostly. And it means that usually like the theory says that there are like two stable states for lakes, like two. So there's one with happy macrophytes and fishes and water quality good and the clarity is good, so no turbidity and so on, and it's good. But then something starts putting stress on the ecosystem. So it can be nutrients, for example. So because there's, imagine, agricultural fields around, and then it rains, usually because it rains, and the nutrients are leaking to the lake. And then more nutrients. In the beginning, the plants can kind of, like the whole ecosystem is resilient enough to kind of hold it. Like, okay, we'll hold it, but at some point, snaps. Okay. And it goes to turbid, and it's dominated by this algae that float, the floating algae, so phytoplankton. And to go back to the previous state is not just by reducing the nutrients to the same level as before, because that state of turbid with algae and so on is also stable and it also has resilience. So even if you start removing the nutrients, they can also hold it like that.
I see.
Being turbid, they can still survive. So it's not like there's one level of nutrients or something. There's not clear. So like you have to like even push more to even lower this stressor to go back. So this is a theory that now is starting to be a bit more questioned and say that it's not clear. Like actually we were part of a research of my supervisor did a more kind of took a lot of research from a lot of lakes done in kind of in this latitude to see, because we were seeing what I mentioned before, like, okay, in Müggelsee, the lake, the nutrients were to a good level, the water was clear, so there was no this algae anymore, but there were also not plants. So it was a kind of in-between thing, those two states. So it's kind of like crushing state, we call it, but it doesn't need to be crushing, it can be the transition to a better place. But it's kind of, we're seeing that it's not like black or white, but it can be also this in between. So sometimes you will see lakes that are kind of more clear, especially shallow lakes, but they have no plants, and you're like, okay, so how is this happening? So there's still so much to learn and so much to do. And one of the theories that my boss has, and I'm studying, is this, that the Periphyton, when the plants start growing, it, as I mentioned before, it kind of creates a blanket on them and they cannot grow happily. And that actually in Müggelsee was very interesting because when I arrived here in 2016, there were very few plants, way less than now. And it has been 4 summers and it's amazing how, and also there was dominated by one species, mostly one. And now like it's way more plants, way more species, way like the diversity is higher. Even like at some point that some people are like complaining that there are
too much.
But my boss, that when she was hired, there were no plants, and she was hired to study plants in this lake, and they were like, "But what are you gonna study if there's nothing there?" So
no,
she's super happy that they are there. So yeah,
cool. And we've seen some pictures of you doing. I love that one of you just in that suit, just kind of floating. So I think I know the answer to that. But are you more of a fieldwork person, or do you prefer to work in the lab and look for the results, or are you like more of an office person? What is your like perfect day doing your work? What would that look like?
So I think usually I'm obviously more a field person, as it's
That's
obvious.
what I thought.
But it's like I think also at some point you get tired and you appreciate a little bit of lab or computer work. Like especially like in this day that you're on a boat and it's raining cats and dogs and it's like you're cold, your underwear is wet, you're like, when is this gonna be over? But I love it because then when you're back, or like now when I look back at these terrible, awful days, it's all experiences and anecdotes. Like even then, even if I'm like, my patience is like to the limit, I'm like, I cherish those moments. So I really like doing field work. And actually in Spain, when you study biology or environmental sciences, we usually say, are you more of a lab coat person or of a boot person? Because in Spanish it's more like bata or bota. So it's a bit more like the words sound funny. So it's like, no, I'm more lab coat. No, I'm more like boot. So I'm more boot than lab coat. But I think all parts are needed in science. So I think my perfect day would be with field work, not too hot, not raining, no wind, but field work, definitely.
That's funny how different your field work has been from mine, because I'm paleontologist and I've done field work and it has to be dry, right? If it's wet, then the sediment kind of soaks up the water and then it could damage the bones and stuff. So it has to be completely dry. So when we have rain days, there's no work done. You do nothing.
So you cannot touch anything.
No, you can't do anything. So, and it's usually like 30 degrees or something, because the field season also in summer. So it's like, you'd hate it.
That's tough.
But everything stays more or less dry. So that's a bonus. But no boats for me. But I love all your pictures of you doing field work. You look so happy. I love that. And let's see, way more. So we talk about like are there?
So it's possible to see climate change on plants under the water. How?
Oh, actually, it's funny because I was going to ask a question about climate change too. So
you're in tune.
Yeah, so someone actually asked my question just in Spanish.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So we do see change.
Maybe I can open the chat.
I've seen some changes actually in Müggelsee, for example. I've seen that there has been a significant increase in temperature in beginning of June mostly. So like when I say significant, it means that it's statistically relevant because we have to talk like that. So, and that usually many organisms, so first, if it gets warmer earlier in the year, it means that plants will probably come earlier, but also it might mean that different organisms react different. So as I said before, it's like a complex network, social network of all the plants, insects, nutrients, algae, and so on. So if there's a mismatch, so like one comes before the other and they were supposed to come together, then it might mean that some plants don't get pollination, and then they don't produce seeds, and then don't grow. Or if, for example, insects come too early and plants have not grown, then they cannot lay their eggs. Or, for example, in my case, it's been actually, in a way, good because it has maybe stimulated the growth of some insects that eat this periphyton, and that's good for the plants because then they get less blanket. So yeah, we start seeing it. And also one, like the worst way we see it is that the last 2 years here in Germany, so not this year, but the years before in Berlin, we have seen. So if you remember that I showed this lake that was green and disgusting.
Yeah.
So we have seen that when the summer is very warm and dry, these blooms, algae blooms,
Oh yeah.
Happen more often and more. And that also creates like another blanket. So it's like if you put you cover the lake, and then so everything that is underneath dies. Not everything, but if that gets really bad, usually fishes can die. There are some species that can survive. There are extreme cases, like in Lake Taihu in China, it's totally green, but there are fishes there, and people actually fish. And
Oh wow.
The fishes there. Yeah. So it does affect, and also less water. Yeah, it's a lot of things, like, because also in the sediment there are nutrients that are usually attached, let's say, connected to other minerals or to other substances. And if then suddenly there's no oxygen because there has been this blanket on top, or there's not enough light, then some processes start that might make those nutrients free. And then the algae is happy because, oh, warm temperature and nutrients, it's like free buffet party, you know. And then they grow a lot, and then in September we get this. Here in September, for example, or end of August, we get this. So we do start seeing. It's not my super field of expertise, but in one of my projects, I study a bit more long term, but it's 20 years, and we do see that there has been an increase in the temperature of the water, an increase in some aspects that are giving us some hint towards this, that this is going to have consequences. And of course, that means also when you have to clean the water before drinking it. So because we don't pump the water from the lake directly into our tap, it means that it's also might mean some extra process there.
Okay.
But
cool. I think I understand what that means. Great answer, right? And it's interesting.
Yeah, more or less.
I'm trying.
Thank you.
It was actually, it's exactly the question I had. That's funny.
So you're in tune with my...
Yeah, totally. There's one, because you talked about different projects that IGB does. So I think we have this across all kinds of fields, but lots of science is project-based, right? You get funding for a project, you get like approved for a project. If there's only like short-term funding, how can you ensure that this monitoring of, for example, Müggelsee, super important lake, how is that ensured that it continuously, gets researched like that? Like, how do you make sure this is something that you can look over for like 20 years or like 30 years?
So actually, the monitoring of that lake, like I was not sure if I wanted to put a photo, because if you go to Müggelsee, you will see that more or less, it's not exactly the center, it's a bit closer to my institute, so to the northern shore. There's a field station. And this all started in the 70s when the rector said, like, to go with a tiny boat and get some samples and then back to the lab and analyze them. And then start, like, I think it was 1974. And ever since until now, we have data for some aspects of Müggelsee. And as I learned also from the head of my department, that is the one responsible for this now, it was never so easy. It had to be a fight that she learned, especially she was in the US and she saw that they were doing it there. So it had to be a fight from first with the institute to keep it doing it and to keep it so now it's a station, but in the past was not like a big station. And then to convince the Senate of Berlin to fund them. So I don't know exactly now how exactly it works, but for example, there's now in Europe, is it Europe level? Yeah, the Water Framework Directive that establishes some aims where our water bodies, so lakes and rivers and so on, have to get before a certain year, which is not happening, not even close. But at least that ensures that some money is put into monitoring certain lakes, and lakes is only lakes that are only big lakes like Müggelsee or Wannsee. So it has to be, I think, 50 hectares. But thanks to that, for example, we can monitor the plants. So every 2 years, a diver, an expert comes and dives down and takes photos, checks what plants are there and so on. So actually, probably in the beginning, saying okay, we're gonna do long-term research, it sounds like an impossible and maybe nonsense thing, or maybe in the past was like, why do we need that? But now that I'm using data since the 70s, and for Müggelsee, there's some data also from the beginning of the 20th century, it's amazing because you can understand better the processes. Because when you have, for example, for one of my experiments, the one in the lakes in Brandenburg, I have only information for one summer, for July and August. Right. So that's like if you take a photo. If I take a photo of you, I can tell a little bit about you now, but I cannot tell your story. I cannot tell how you got here. I cannot really understand why maybe you look so happy or why whatever. But if I had like a lot of photos of you since you were a child until now, maybe I could understand. And not only of you, but also I know of your family, of your friends. The same, like if I know about the lake, but not only about the lake, but what happened around the lake and so on. Because the story of Müggelsee is very interesting, actually. So, because it's a perfect example that had a lot of biodiversity, but then because of agriculture around and so on, started to get a lot of nutrients, and little by little, the plants, the biodiversity started disappearing, and around the 70s, it was like a desert.
Wow.
But then in the 90s, when the reunification, which is pretty, like
topical.
Yesterday was the anniversary, the 30th anniversary, there was a restructuring or replanning of the area, and the nutrients started to be more under control. But still, it happened that the plants didn't come. So the state of the lake was better, but the plants didn't return. So it's like the perfect, having data of that lake for so long is perfect, because then you get a model.
Yeah.
So how do they ensure that? I don't know, but I know that the head of my department, Rita Adrian, she had to fight in the past to keep this monitoring going, and now it's like like having these data is. And now, thanks to my supervisor, now we have also my algae, my blanket, is also kind of part of this long term. So
I feel like there's lots of fighting in science all the time.
Yeah.
Especially to keep things around and keep things going, right? So I'm not surprised that someone had to fight. I have a question that I didn't write down that just came to me, so I hope it's okay if I just spontaneously ask it. You showed what your experiments are like set up, right? So, I mean, Müggelsee is not close to the public. Everybody can go there, right? So you can just like go for a swim or go on a boat or whatever. Have you ever had problems with people like taking your research out, or like play with it, or like accidentally or on purpose like destroy it? Has that ever happened?
So not really, but in Müggelsee there's a fisherman, and we had to like, we are allowed to put experiment there, because I'm not putting chemicals or anything, it's just installing something and it's right in front of my institute. But he also fishes around there, he puts some nets. So every year when we install it, we need to tell him, because it's better to keep a good relationship with all the people. But it has, I recently, like, and when I say recently, it's like 1.5 months ago, I discovered that in one of the other experiments in Brandenburg, a person that was partially related to this project saw the experiment and went there and took one of the strips, and he thought there was something written or something like that, and it removed with the finger the Periphyton. So actually, I got told like 1.5 months ago, and this experiment was 3 years ago, and then going through the photos, I think the photo I put there with a strip, there's a corner without, and I took a photo because I was like, what happened here?
Yeah.
So when I was going through those photos, I was like, maybe this is a strip this person took and removed a little bit of Periphyton, because this person thought there was like something, information written about it. Like, why there's gonna be information written? And every of my experiments had a big poster with information and the phone number of my supervisor, because I didn't speak German back then, so it was better if she got the phone calls.
Yeah.
So it was a bit strange, but I mean, that's why you have to put also what we call replicates. So you cannot have only one. Sometimes you cannot have more, but usually you need to have several.
Yeah.
Because accidents happen. But since I was using I didn't have expensive equipment, but some of my, usually people when they plan experiments, like some, in this UVI, Urban Water Interfaces project I talk about, some of my friends or colleagues, they had to install things. And when they went back to pick up the stuff, it was gone. Because people sit there, they see a device, they see whatever, or I don't know, maybe someone thinks that is rubbish, I don't know, whatever. So those things happen. And I think when we plan field work, not only I didn't think so much of like someone destroying it, but it could happen. But it can happen also. Like I was going to in Müggelsee to sample one of my cages. And when first of all I saw that a storm had destroyed half of them, and it was the beginning of my PhD, and I was like panic. I was like, oh my god. And then later in the season, I saw that there were some ducks with ducklings.
Yeah.
So the coot was with little ducklings, and the mom or that coot was like jumping into my cage and diving inside and getting plants from there. So of course, when they dive, of course they probably hit the experiment or whatever. And I was like,
those damn ducks.
this is nature, like fieldwork. I think that's the cool thing of fieldwork, and that's why, for example, they say that people that were more used to fieldwork, then we are not so good on other parts because we're kind of more relaxed or laid back because we know that these things happen and we have to be.
Yeah.
Or I found one experiment in one of the lakes, the full experiment floating. Like it was supposed, you saw that there were rods, and then it was underwater, but the sediment was very sandy. So what happened is that they float up.
Yeah.
And I found them there, and I had barely no material, so I got my scouts skills to work. And I made with bricks and stuff, like I kind of rebuilt it, and it kind of worked. But when I saw it floating there, at least it was just there because no one had. I mean, people could access it, but those things happen, and you're like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I mean, accidents happen the same when you drop a glass at home or whatever.
Yeah, just whatever.
Like, what am I gonna do? But it's not always. I mean, sometimes I also wanted to shout and say,
those damn ducks.
Why? Yeah.
Yeah, that was just like when I saw the pictures of what your setup looks like, I was like, I wonder if people just come and touch that, because people will touch anything if it's just there. So yeah. All right. Good to know. So people, if you watch and you see things like that in a lake, just let it be.
Yeah.
If you see some ducks, maybe shoo them away. So I always feel kind of like creepy when I look up friends, but I looked you up on the internet.
Oh my god.
And I saw that you're also part of an urban algae project.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, can you, so nothing bad, don't worry.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god.
But I saw that are there like different hubs internationally? Because I saw a map and there's one in Berlin and you're part of that, right? Can you just mention what that is and what the goal is?
So this is a project that actually some people they were based in IGB or between IGB and NEO in the Netherlands. So there's an European Freshwater Federation, let's say, and they give funding for early career scientists, so like PhDs and postdocs, so young or early career, to develop your own project. So these 4 women decided to develop a project to study urban lakes, so lakes that are surrounded by in a city or in a town or whatever, and also to study them, but then to make a survey with people, so build a survey based on photos and so on to study the perception of people of the lakes, to see if what we scientists say, okay, this is bad quality or this is good quality, or this, if it matches what people actually perceive. So like, first of all, studying urban waters that now is increasing more and more, but usually when people were studying lakes and rivers was out. It was like 2 things disconnected. One thing is the cities and one thing is nature, and we study nature. No, but nature is also in the city, in the parks, in the rivers, in the lakes. So this was a cool thing that you could study we could study urban lakes. And what they did is like, instead of being like then the leaders and telling everybody what to do, they wanted to make it as collaborative and horizontal as possible. I found super cool and challenging for them. So they say like, there will be like working groups. So they will have working groups for aquatic plants, a working group for the phytoplankton, so the small algae, a working group to design the survey. And you could join either the one you were expert or the one you could want to learn or whatever, and develop a protocol and so on. And then on that, once we did all the field work, then it was a survey, and the survey is done, and now they are analyzing the information of the survey. Right. And at some point it will turn into like I don't know what the conclusions are, because they are not there yet, but I found it super cool for two reasons. One, because it's trying to connect society and scientists and to see if actually matches. And second, because they made science in a way that is usually not done, and it's collaborating, and everybody was as important as the other person, and you got the chance to explore fields that maybe you were not an expert in, and it was international, which is also pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's a bit like, so now it's in the phase of studying the data.
And when did you join? Approximately.
I think it was 2018.
Okay.
I think it started 2000. It ran 18 and 19, so those were the 2 years that ran, and now it's like the wrapping up.
Okay. And what group were you part of?
I was a bit in the social media.
Oh, nice.
I was in the aquatic plants, of course. And social media, I joined a little bit also the survey, but they, for example, we wanted to translate to different languages. So then you could join to say what languages you spoke, and you could join to help. So I helped a little bit with the Spanish translation. Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
A very cool project.
And what would you say, let's start with the negative. What do you think is the worst part of your job? If you would have to name one. Because let's be real, there's always something.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is like, what to pick? No, I'm joking. No, but like, so the worst part is that I think it's precarity. Like we get not much money for very short time to do an insane amount of work that is not doable in this short time. I think this is the worst part.
Funding then,
so the funding and also the conditions. Like you have to, I mean, you are hired to do certain hours, but you're not doing twice as much or even more. And it's like accepted within the academia community. It's accepted that you are that it's a PhD life.
Yeah.
And it's like, it shouldn't be like that. Because then there's mental health issues that luckily people are talking more and more about that, which I think it's great. So this is the worst part. And then the part I find the most boring one is writing.
Right.
Because it's a very strict format, how you have to write papers and scientific articles. And doesn't leave too much room for creativity, and it's a lot of computer and so on. But it's when you see that it's starting to get some kind of shape, it gets exciting to see that you have written something. But the step of like studying is a bit, I find it, I'm more a field person. I'm more action, getting my hands dirty. I think that's
okay, that's the worst part. Funny. I actually quite enjoy academic writing. Like... Do
you want to write my paper?
I can try. I can like try to find a paleo take on it.
That would be funny.
Yeah, because we also published my thesis. Like I enjoyed writing this thesis the most during my master's. Like going to class, I hated everything, and then I could finally write my thesis, and I was like, I have arrived. It's like I felt really good about it. And then I do like writing, but the publishing is what bothers me. It's like that is the part that bothers me. The writing and the research and stuff, I like that a lot. But yeah, as you mentioned earlier. All right. So what is your favorite part of your work? What do you enjoy the most?
I mean, I enjoy the most being out in the field, but I find, so what charges my batteries is doing field work, of course. And also like when you go and harvest you see what you got. It's kind of exciting to be outside, but I also like a lot when I go to conferences or I meet people, like it can be informal. It doesn't need to be like a proper meeting, and you start discussing, and it might not be in exactly my topic, like plants or whatever, but then you start discussing and questioning each other and so on, and then you feel like your brain expands a little bit, like, because for my PhD I was pretty alone, pretty lonely, because I was never a part of a big project, or I was part of a big project, but it was mostly in German, so like my supervisor kind of took over that side. So when I was having these moments of like interacting with other people, going to conferences or to I don't know, even when I did like last year, during the Berlin Science Week in the U-Bahn, that I talk about my research a little bit similar to what I did here today. I found it very cool to then people asking questions, and then you are forced to question things that you assume.
Yeah, new perspective, right? You kind of like, oh, I have never thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. Like giving a new perspective, and that is very refreshing.
Yeah, that's also my favorite part. That's why I ended up doing this.
Yeah, I think you are actually at completely another level.
I kind of like, I was like, research is great, but I also want to talk to people. I want to do that more.
Yeah.
My favorite is when it doesn't even have to be related to the specific topic, but when Kaffee Klatsch was still like open to the public and everybody was kind of like sitting together and drinking coffee and stuff, when people would say, I had no idea this happened here. Like, I had no idea there was research done in the museum. It blew my mind. And like, but what about all the rooms? What did you think was here? Oh, like just like, I don't know, books and stuff. And like, no, they're actually people doing such cool stuff. And that sentence of, I had no idea, that just, I love when that happens. Like, for example, I didn't know that much about lakes, right? I didn't know we had a semi-closed water cycle. I was just kind of like, yeah, we have rivers and we have lakes, you know, but I hadn't thought about it that much, even though I'm a Berliner and I've like know all the places that you mentioned. That's something that was kind of like also new to me, and I was kind of like, what? That is so cool, like interesting, and I love when other people have that experience too.
Yeah.
So Fox Science is like, we just had it, right? And there were also people there that were like, oh wow, I didn't know that this kind of stuff happened and that this kind of research existed. Like, it was really cool too.
Yeah, it's super cool when people like in this kind of event or in science on Berlin Science Week, when suddenly we scientists stop talking like in this high language. Like, I stopped using words like macrophytes and phytoplankton and protein shifts and so on, and you start talking about like the plants and the water and the algae and so on, and you start talking in a language that people can understand, and then people can listen to, I don't know, in some sense we've listened about quantum physics.
Yeah.
That for me is like, what?
Yeah.
Or mathematics, or like, I don't know.
Still blows my mind though, physics.
Yeah, of course. but it's like amazing that it can be done.
Yeah.
Like, scientists, we can talk to people about science and everybody can learn about it, which I find super cool and super important nowadays.
Yeah. And scientists are just normal people, right? That's why I like to come together over coffee and talk about the stuff, because that's something that people can connect over. You know, you don't need to be scientists to like coffee. You don't need to be normal, like public person to like coffee. Like, it's something you both like, you come together and then you talk about something in a casual way. I enjoy that a lot.
Exactly.
I have two more questions, but do feel free to write in the chat, and I can't see the YouTube chat, but I think we have someone having an eye on. No? Okay.
No questions.
So no questions. Okay, but if you have questions, feel free to write them there. Something I recently started asking is, how has the pandemic changed your way of working? Has it at all? Because if you're outside, is that any difference? Or did you have to work a lot at home? Like, how has it changed in the last months?
So, I mean, for me, it was kind of okay because I was in the writing process. But for many of my colleagues, it was a big problem, because when you have a big field campaign and you have to bring, I don't know, 10 people, 15 people to the field to do something close to each other, they had to just postpone it. But it's not always possible when you're a postdoc and you have 2-year project.
There's no other season. You have to do this one.
Yeah, you have to do it. So you have to like try to adapt, and especially when we study plants are only alive for a certain period, and most of that was pandemic. So that was a bit tricky, but I think, I mean, my work hasn't been affected by the pandemic, luckily, but many of my colleagues had to kind of renegotiate, but thanks to some like understanding of the situation, some of them had gotten prolongations and so on, but
good.
I had to do some field work, and we had to take certain measures. We really have to think carefully on details that usually you take for granted, because you're gonna have to, like on the boat, I mean, you can try to have 1.5 meter distance, but when I take a rake full of macrophytes I need my colleague or the student close to me to grab them and sample them and so on. So you really need to think of like how you're gonna approach all that. But I think it has added a new dimension of things you need to consider when you plan.
More problem solving.
Yeah, but many projects were like international projects, for example, have changed completely. But I think there has been something positive that is when it comes to reconsider how much we travel for science, for the sake of science. So I've been in conferences in Mexico and Canada, which sounds like, ooh, super cool, and it's awesome. But at the same time, it's like, how necessary is that I go once per year or whatever, or scientists, I mean, I'm just a PhD, but like more senior scientists that they travel 1 or 2 times per year. How necessary is, how often do we need to actually be there? There are advantages of being in person because maybe the interaction is easier and better, but also we can we have seen that we can use technology to avoid flying so much. So I think there have been a lot of negative things, but also things we have learned. And we've been forced to reconsider and learn how to work in a different way. I think that's to think of something not so negative.
I think it has, what I've seen in my own environment is that it has made scientists have more empathy for people that can't travel. Like there's scientists with disabilities too, right? They can't just often take off and go and join a conference. So I hope that hopefully when things get back to more normal, that certain measures will just stay the same to make it more diverse and include more people. Because I have some friends in paleontology with disabilities, and they're just like, they finally feel like there is something, like they can join stuff now, and they can be part of stuff now that couldn't be before because they felt excluded, or it's so I guess something good came out of it when it comes to conferences anyway.
No, that's a good point.
Because it's also something that I want to consider more, but I haven't thought about all the time. I just went to a conference, you get excited, but you're also tiring. It's like a week and you network and you sit there. You're just like so wrapped up in what you're doing. You don't really think about the people that are not there. But would love to be there. And now that more and more stuff is online, or like this is online, you can just watch it from your couch, right? So you have more access to it now. I have a last question, and it's layered. There's more stuff. So maybe I'm just gonna read it to you. Which advice would you give to a young student that might want to join your path, like who wants to be a scientist and doesn't really know if there is a place for them there? Like, let's say maybe a young girl doesn't really know how to get into your field. What would you tell her?
I mean, if you know you want to be a scientist, I mean, go for it and find your way. That's for sure. Because I mean, there's also people. I mean, if you don't like science and it's the only way it's like, okay, let's try this. Probably you will not be so happy. Maybe yes, maybe you find your perfect place here. But if you know, I mean, if you want to be a scientist or you want to explore it, go for it. I don't know what I would say. I mean, go online. Don't be afraid of. I mean, this is easier said than done, but don't be afraid of contacting people. Especially don't be afraid of contacting master students, PhDs, postdocs. Those levels are, I mean, if I get an email from someone, and it has happened a couple of times, asking me about how is to work in the institute where I work and so on, because they're considering doing a master's thesis or PhD, whatever, we're happy to answer and to be honest. And even if it's in the same city, now with Corona maybe not, but to meet for a coffee or whatever, like, it's also good to get a real feeling, because you can read on the website, or you can read papers, or you can read news, or you can watch this event. But if you want to make questions that are maybe a little bit more personal, for personal feeling, or like how is to be a foreigner in this institute that is only German, that I had gotten that question, or how is to be a foreigner in Berlin. So just go for it. Sending an email is super easy if you are a bit more. For me, it's a bit harder. But like if you're more like outgoing person, or I don't know how to put it, ask for a coffee, to have a coffee with someone or whatever, and just talk about it and go for it, and ask for. Usually, if you're master's student, I mean, when you do your thesis, you say you're not paid.
Yeah.
So probably any institution will get you, would accept you to work for them. And that's also a great opportunity to explore. Like that's what I like for my master thesis, that I got the chance to go to a research institute that I had never been, I had never worked or anything, and to get a feeling for it.
Yeah.
Like it's because you are not risking anything, and anyway, you can always take the step, try it, and if you don't like it, you can always say bye. But so like it's not like you are not. I don't know. I wasn't born thinking I was gonna do a PhD. I didn't want to be a researcher. Not that I didn't want to be, but it was nothing I had thought of. I was more gonna work in applied, like going and do restoration projects. And then suddenly I found, so it's not like this idea of like it's a genius that it's been always with the best grades in school and blah blah. No, it's like something that you are curious, you have questions, you want to think about things. You like lab, or you like fieldwork, or you like. There's a lot of people that just do, not just do, like they do things on the computer. So
that's true.
So I think curiosity is one of the biggest things from my point of view to be a scientist, not this genius myth that exists. Sometimes that we are, as you see, we are normal people that drink coffee, eat
which
cookies.
Is normal, I swear.
We're like, I'm not so smart. No, I'm joking.
It's funny, when I was still in school, I was really good at English and history and German. But then, you can have electives and you can get rid of classes, and I got rid of physics, chemistry. I was like, be gone. Math. I couldn't quit. That was like not. I was stuck with that.
Yeah.
I had biology still, but I didn't end up doing biology at first, and I wasn't very sciencey. I wanted to just read books and be paid for it. Like what job can I have?
So I like that job.
Yeah, like a librarian. Like I would love that. But I also wanted to be a paleontologist. It just happened to be that I also had to take chemistry and physics, so it was kind of a grievance, but it didn't stop me. Right? Like I wasn't very good at it at school, so I got rid of it, and then it's at university. It was something that I thought of, okay, this is just necessary now, but I didn't enjoy it, but it was fine because I knew what I was doing it for, right? So, but
you could see the light at the end of
the tunnel, yeah. And but I was not good at math, physics, and all that. Like biology, yes, but not like invertebrates or microbiology. No, if it doesn't have a spine, then I don't know about it. But yeah, I don't think that should stop you if that's what you wanted.
And actually, I think that one of the good things, or how it should be, is in science, or should be. I would like it to be, is like, for example, I'm not an expert. I love statistics. I love maths and physics. I was the opposite.
You love
when
it?
I had to study.
You know that about you?
I don't know, Spanish language. That is, you had to study Spanish language. I didn't enjoy that at all. So I was like, okay, I study this, and to take a break, I was doing maths or physics because it was kind of fun. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's great. We're all different.
But now, for example, I'm more like, I know better like how plants function, how ecosystem function, and so on, and I have forgotten a little bit my statistics part. But I think we shouldn't, or we don't need to have all knowledge that is required for a PhD. But if I have a colleague that is an expert on statistics, then I can go to that person and say, okay, I have this data, I have tried this, but this doesn't fit my data, so what should I do? Do you have some tip? Then this person helps me. And then maybe this person later on has a problem. It can be with research, or it can be like, I need someone to water my plants at home. I don't know. But I think this collaboration concept should take a lot of pressure off all of us. Like, if you don't have to be the perfect, like you need to know statistics, plan experiments, lab,
no one does that. No one knows all of that.
Blah, 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 blah. Like programming, everything. You need to know all. Nobody, if you, like, actually some people in my institute started creating a database with PhDs and postdocs and what they have to offer. So then you could go to this database. It's a bit like not so used, but I thought it was a good initiative because I could go there and say, okay, who knows about R? For example, R is a program we use to analyze data usually. This person knows, so I can contact this person and say like, this. And then this person, when this person, she or he needs help, can go to a database and say like, and then it's kind of a
pretty cool
collaboration thing. So I think science would be much better if we were also not afraid of asking for help.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Someone wants to know what the weirdest plant or animal is that you've seen in your lakes. Not a snapping turtle, I think.
No,
snapping
luckily
turtle.
not. Okay, weirdest. Oh my god, what a question.
I mean, in the pictures, lots of stuff looks weird.
I like this question.
It's a good question.
I haven't thought about it. Let's see, weirdest.
Some of the stuff looked pretty slimy to me. So for me, it looked weird. But if you see it all the time, maybe it's not weird for you.
Yeah, maybe I've gotten used to. Yeah, there's a plant that I like it a lot. It looks like maybe it's not super weird, but I think it's funny. And also how this plant lives and behaves, it's kind of funny. It's called Stratiotes aloides, and it's like if you take a pineapple and you take the leaves, cut it, and put it in a lake. Basically, that's how the plant looks like.
Oh, really?
It looks like the top of the pineapple, so it's pretty funny.
In Müggelsee too?
No, in Müggelsee.
Okay.
So usually this plant is in lakes with not a lot of nutrients, and usually it's a plant that in summer goes up, so it's on the surface, so it looks actually like a very thick grass field.
Yeah.
And then, or like a bit like a tropical.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not, they can be up to this big like a lettuce, but also smaller or bigger. And then in winter, they go down to the bottom. And then in summer, up and down.
Oh,
and
really?
also, sediment accumulates on top of them. So it can be also a way that terrestrial plants might start kind of colonizing the lake, like growing on top of these plants, because they can use the sediment that has accumulated in these plants.
Yeah. And
it's pretty cool because, I don't know, I found it very cool, first of all, because it looks like a palm tree or a pineapple. And second, because they go like, it's usually a good indicator. So at least that's what I learned when I was because when I did my master thesis and then I work as a research field assistant in the Netherlands, I had to visit more than, I don't know, in total 20, 30 lakes in the Netherlands. Because in the Netherlands, I mean, you make a hole on the ground and you have a lake.
Yeah.
Basically. There are tons of lakes, and the research done there in lakes is amazing also. And there was one lake that one whole corner was full of that, and I was like, what's that? And also in one of my lakes in Brandenburg, my lakes. That's what I think I told you about
your lakes. They're my lakes.
Because
you always say they're yours.
In my lakes.
I love that. I mean, I call Tristan is mine. I worked on Tristan. It's mine,
Oh, wow. I mean, you have a big one. I mean, and
but
Tristan
I know
is also very
mean.
famous.
Yeah, there you go. But that's all the whole language.
And with in Spanish, I also say like mis lagos. Like, sí, porque mis lagos, blah, blah, blah.
They must think you're famous when you go home.
You just when I say mis lagos, like, yeah, I have so much money there that I just buy like,
all
like
my
here and there, like all mine, including Müggelsee. So if you go there, no. So one of these lakes, when I went there I didn't install the experiment because I had an accident back then, halfway my PhD, but thanks to a collaboration of colleagues and my boss, other people installed the experiment in the lake where I was recovering. So that was super helpful because otherwise my PhD couldn't have happened. So this plant was there, and it's what I learned in the Netherlands. I tried to say that before, is usually an indicator of good quality of the water. But it might be that the lake has good quality of water, but it has, because there are lakes with more nutrients in the water and lakes with less nutrients in the water. But it might be that both have good quality. Yeah. It's just a different type of ecosystem. It's like you cannot compare Atlantic forest with, I don't know, a tropical forest. You won't find the same things, but it doesn't mean that one is bad and one is good. It's just different. So when I saw that, now I get very excited because they told me like, oh, this is a good sign. And when I saw them there, and actually I saw them down. So sometimes you look down and you see like all the kind of tropical forest there, like pineapples growing there. So I think that would be, because animal, I don't know. I haven't found the shark in Müggelsee yet, but it might be the one eating my experiment.
Should be eating the ducks instead.
No, I'm not sure. I'm sure I found weird stuff, but I will remember for sure when I'm on my way home, and I will say, I should have found this.
Yeah. As long as you don't find like water snakes or something. Because when I went on vacation once, there were like snakes. I mean, they were in the ocean, but I'm really scared of snakes. Oh my god! You know, you're not supposed to make sudden movements. because it that attracts them, and I would just be underwater like so as long I feel like if I wouldn't see a snake somewhere, which can happen if you do field work in like Montana to dig up dinosaurs, lots of like rattlesnakes and stuff.
Of course. Yeah.
No. But no weird animals for you.
No, I don't know. I've seen like suddenly in one of these cages I had that were not very big, like the rounded ones were like this big. I went to sample it and I found a fish inside, and I was like, and they stick a little bit up above the surface to try to avoid that because I was trying not to have fishes inside. I was like, but guy, what are you doing here? Like, it was like as big as that thing, and so probably jumped, or maybe there were waves or something. I could jump.
I was thinking that maybe.
And it got in, and I'm like, but dude, or like in the beginning, I wanted to have in Müggelsee one of the big cages without fishes to see how the insect that grow on the Periphyton were growing without the pressure of being eaten. I was like, perfect. So we have one thing with the bottom that is transparent, so we can look under the water. So we call it aquascope. So we look, and I was like, I don't see fishes on. If I saw that there was some fish, but one thing we didn't consider is that was the size of a fish when it's born. Super tiny. So those fishes could go through the mesh that was surrounding. And what happened that then some of them, they were like, okay, this is paradise. We have here, say we have plants, we have everything. So they grew and grew, and at some point they couldn't leave. And what happens, like they were small, or the water was not clear enough, so I could see everything. And they moved, so it's not so easy to see. And then when I removed the experiment in end of September, October, and I checked, because you pull the cage out, and I was like, 18 fishes? I was like, what? I mean, they were small, so then they go to the lake and they live happily ever after. But I was like, okay, this, I mean, of course, just to be, for everybody that's out there, I haven't used that data because I don't know how reliable that is. But I was like, and the funny thing is that I had another cage where I put fishes inside.
Oh, on purpose?
On purpose, so to put pressure. But then those were getting some infection and dying. So actually that was not working. And the one that I didn't want fish, the fishes were jumping in, and I was like,
but it evens out, isn't that good?
The thing is that I couldn't count how many, like from the beginning, of when were they there, and blah, blah, blah. So then that data is in a drawer. I don't use it, but I was like, seriously. And actually I mentioned it before, like this earring I have, it's a small fish, you cannot see it, but I remember when the fishes were getting this infection and dying, my supervisor saw me with these earrings and was like, are you wearing them to give good luck to the fishes to survive? And I was like, maybe.
Oh, we have another question from YouTube. What do people say when they see you collecting sample in these lakes? Oh, when you're doing work, are people like coming over and be like, yo, what you doing? Or
so in some lakes it's too remote, there's no one. But there was one lake I remember, I think actually the last lake for my PhD that I sampled, that there were a bunch of kids there, like and families with kids and so on, because people go swimming there. And they were asking me if, so usually people don't think about the plants or the Periphyton. People don't even know that Periphyton exists. So people usually think of the fishes. So they ask me like, if I'm catching fishes, or like when they see that you are working, you're a scientist in the water, they ask you like, is the water good? Like, I can swim here, right? Like, oh my God, a scientist in the lake. Like,
oh yeah, it's usually bad sign, huh?
Or like people think also, they tend to think that because I study lakes, I know how every single lake in Berlin is. So
of course.
Like, what lake would you recommend? Like, Müggelsee is really good between May and that's what I know for sure. But I mean, there are databases for this information. But like things like that, the same as when I was studying, probably it happened to you when you study biology. Like when I study environmental sciences, I get questions of like, yeah, my plant is dying and it's getting these things, and it's like, you know why? Like, No, I mean, I'm the one in my balcony sometimes. My plants start dying. I like to try to grow tomatoes, even though sometimes it's impossible. And then they get something, and I'm like, I had to Google it. Of course, we are supposed to know a little bit more because we do study plants and so on. But it's I find it very funny actually. For today, I was thinking like, should I look up more lakes in Berlin to know a bit, like in case I get the question of like, what lake would you recommend, or what is better? I mean, usually the further from civilization, let's say, the more natural, the better the lake should be. So the less pressure from humans, usually that would mean that lake will be probably better.
Yeah, less pollution and stuff,
less
right?
pollution.
From boats, right?
From boats, could be from houses around, from the city itself, also like having paved areas around and stuff like that, that doesn't let the river or the lake breathe. And usually upstream from cities. So like swimming in Müggelsee, it's fine, but maybe I wouldn't swim in Spree in the river in Hakechamat. For example, I mean, I know people do it. There's one day that people do it, but I don't know if I would do it.
No.
But yeah, I think people usually get a bit worried, like when they see scientists in the lake, like, oh my God, there's something, because you hear stories always like, I don't know, some years ago, some dogs died in Lake Tegel, because there was an algae bloom, and then people are like,
oh, really?
Yeah.
So they went in the water, and I mean, I know that it's harmful, but yikes. Okay.
So if it's too much, or if they drink too much, I mean, it might be also triggered by other aspects from the dogs, but people get very worried. But we also study healthy lakes to learn from those lakes.
But it's because in movies, the scientist only really is shown, when shit hits the fan.
I mean, look, now with the climate change, the shit is all over the place, and still scientists are not very. Hey, climate change is happening.
Yeah. But
summers are longer. This is nice.
I think it's my parents have a little house by a lake, and I think if they would see scientists walking around, they would also be like, "What's happening here? This is what's happening."
Yeah, or you see something you cannot recognize, or like some boat that looks a bit like suspicious, and you're like, okay, what are they doing here?
It's just funny. I think my parents wouldn't actually go to the scientists and ask. They would then, because I'm also a scientist, right? They would call me and be like, "There was a scientist in my lake. Why?" Like, I don't know.
What's happening?
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, actually,
you must know all the scientists.
Yeah, exactly.
I know all of them. Yeah.
All researchers are connected in this. That would be awesome, actually.
Yeah.
If we could transfer the knowledge from each other.
It's just funny because they sometimes, not today, but they sometimes watch Kaffeeklatsch, or they've been to Kaffeeklatsch at the museum. So I think they know that I talk a lot to scientists and I meet a lot of scientists. I think they think that I just, I know all of them.
Yeah, I mean, you learn a lot and you bring scientists together. So in a way, they're not so. Maybe you don't know all the science to the details, but
I always know who I can ask. So if I have like a lake-related thing now, I can ask you. You might go to like
Google
woman now.
No, but I mean, now for this talk, I was asking other colleagues also, because there were aspects that I wanted to talk about, and so I asked my boyfriend, for example, or other colleagues about water quality, or a friend in Spain that she teaches biology, and I was like, maybe how you explain like about algae, for example, like give me some material. I mean, I have explained this last year, for example, in the UBAN, or for the Girls and Women in Science Day, but I wanted to get more information. So I think it's important I think that's super important, that we should think more on like asking experts than relying on only YouTube videos. I'm not saying that YouTube videos are bad, don't get me wrong, but like it's important to contrast and see where that information comes from. So YouTube videos are a super good way of learning about things, or articles from blogs and stuff like that, but it's important to know where that information comes from. And if you know people that work on that, just ask, because maybe that person doesn't get the answer, but as you said, now you know who to ask. So then you will ask that person. Like and we love to. I think it's good to be asked. Like we feel that we're useful.
And do you think you're gonna stay in science, or like, do you want to do a postdoc, or do you want to go in a different field? Or don't you know yet?
It's a good question. If I find a postdoc that is interesting, I might consider to try to explore a little bit a different stage in science. But as I said before, I've been always more of an applied, hands-on person, and the more you go up in research, the further you get. I mean, postdoc, you are still 100% hands-on, but I don't see myself as people that want to reach professor level, like to the university and so on. I don't. And ideally, I would like to go back to combine a bit of research with applying projects. So I would like to work to work in restoration ecology, and doesn't have to be this aquatic ecology, but I would like to, for example, explore working in marine ecology. It's a field that I always loved and I feel very connected to. So I'm really open to anything, but ideally I would like to work in an NGO or a governmental agency where I can do some research, small research or be in contact with researchers, and then use that knowledge to restore the ecosystem, or to, I don't know, if something needs to be done in a certain place, to be part of the designing team, negotiating with other actors and people, like being more outside, not only to the field, but like in contact with more people and so on. I think that's ideally what I would like to do. That's also one of the reasons I was studying German, not only because it's much easier life in Germany if you speak German, but also because I want to try to have a chance to find a job in something that is more applied. And once you leave research in any country, you need to speak the languages, usually. So if I want to have a chance, I need to speak better.
So the next Kaffee Klatsch with you is going to be in German. We have one more question. I think we can take it before we have to finish up. And it's, can you distinguish artificial and natural lakes based on the plants found there? Germany has lots of artificial lakes, right? So is that a difference?
Not really. No, because
that's what I thought.
No, simply because once an artificial lake is created, there's I've never studied a lake that was right way created, but in the Netherlands, I had studied tons of lakes, and I know colleagues here have studied also lakes that were artificial. And many lakes come from mining, for example, open mining, or from extracting materials for building highways or whatever. Then you could find any kind of plant, or like one of the lakes I studied in the Netherlands was a super deep lake that was first used to extract peat, and then they used to extract sand. And actually the story is funny because first it was only for peat, and then they started extracting sand, but already around the lake there were houses. And when they started extracting sand, what happened, like if you make a hole in the sand on the beach, what happens? At the sides do like this. So then suddenly they started saying that the shore was receding, and they had to stop. And that lake, for example, was super clear, the visibility was amazing and so on, and that was a super artificial lake. So my opinion, I'm reading the next question.
So there's no difference.
So, I mean, I haven't studied that, but I've been in both types of lakes, and I think there's no way to distinguish. Basically, it will depend on what type of sediment there is, what plants are around, because in the end, the plants will be there, unless it's a lake that has been manipulated on purpose to do some research or whatever. It will be based on what comes from other ecosystems, either seeds, or sometimes birds might, or animals might, the seeds might get, or pieces of plant, because there are some plants, like the one I use as my, like my, not pet, my assistant, thank you. That one, for example, if you break it into pieces, each piece you break can turn into a whole plant again.
Right.
So actually that plant is super invasive. So if that plant, a piece gets tangled in any animal or bird or a boat, and the boat goes somewhere else and so on, that's also a way of, like, many invasive species or exotic species are going around the world in boats. Then those plants will probably colonize. And as far as I know, I mean, there are some species sometimes that are indicators for, like, first colonizers, because they are more generalists. They feel comfortable in a wider range of nutrients, light, and so on. So maybe that can tell you something, but that can tell you also that that lake has been degraded, or that lake is being restored, or like. So as far as I know, but it's a question I haven't really worked much on it, because what I saw in the Netherlands, I didn't see difference. I mean, in the Netherlands, I saw the difference. Like, for example, some lakes were square, And obviously a natural lake is not going to be squared.
No.
Like Müggelsee, for example, is natural. It comes from the glacier period here. Yes, there were glaciers in Berlin.
That's why it's so sandy, right? The sediment is quite sandy, and
Yeah,
lots of sand was brought in by glaciers.
So actually, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know that. I only knew that.
Yeah, it's because of the Ice Age.
So cool.
Geologists, right?
Yeah. So my mother.
Your mother had a question.
Has a question. Question. It's almost like more like she wants to make fun of me.
Classic
So she was
mom.
saying, what were the cows that were checking on you and chasing you in the Netherlands, thinking about your research? And
Did cows chase you?
I'm allowed to answer in English, she said. So basically what happened is that in the Netherlands, there's a lot of agriculture. And instead of building fences between each field, there are channels. So with one researcher, I was sampling those channels.
I'm so excited about this answer.
And so we were, sampling macrophytes, sampling plants, algae, and putting it. And there was a student with us that was taking also different species of plants to go in the lab and then kind of write which one is which and so on, like to build up some knowledge. And then suddenly cows are super curious and they were walking and they surrounded us. So we were in front of the ditch, like the dike there, the channel. I mean, channels usually are not very deep.
Yeah.
But then, and all the cows were looking at us like in a semicircle, perfect, like if they were honestly interested in what we were doing. And one cow, actually named her after my brother, I think he's gone. I called her Manuela, I don't know why. And she decided to steal our sampling material. So suddenly I see the cow like doing like this, in between our things, grab a rope and start running with one of our devices. Luckily, it was like something very like nothing happened. Yeah. And then came back and started stealing the bags with samples that the student had taken. Like,
cheeky.
So with cows, it's fine. The problem is when they were bulls. That was another story. But no, like with this fieldwork that we had to sample a lot of channels and dikes and so on, it was very interesting because also we had to go through nettle, like it was super stitch. I don't know, amazing. It was a lot of fun now I look back.
We have more questions. Okay, let's quickly go through it. Why is algae toxic? Does it create
anaerobic conditions?
Yeah. What is the remedy?
So not all of algae. So algae itself is not toxic. Some algae or cyanobacteria release some toxic it's their way of fighting, like the same as, I don't know, animals have spikes, others bite, others
defense mechanism.
Right. Exactly. So it's a way to compete against other algae and plants and so on. And when they grow like this, like the algae blooms and create a whole layer on top, then that can create anaerobic condition. Anaerobic means that there's no oxygen in the water. So it can create anaerobic conditions and that changes the whole cycle. So there can be, as I said before, nutrients can be released from the sediment. Plants might die. It depends on how long it is there. So for example, in Müggelsee that it happens end of August, September, it doesn't affect the plants because the plants are already decaying. So it's not a big problem. And
it goes away on its own, too. You don't really have to do anything, right?
Yeah, so usually the remedy is not like what to do with it in the moment. I mean, this is not my field of expertise. So if someone, an expert in algae and cyanobacteria, and I say something wrong, please say it. But basically they find good conditions for them to grow. So like the lake must have high levels of nutrients, for example, and also warm conditions favor them. So like, as I said before, this last summer in Müggelsee, the temperature was higher than normal. And the nutrients that the lake has, because it's an eutrophic lake, that was the perfect free buffet for cyanobacteria. So there are different ways of controlling those algae blooms, and one can be like, for example, why is there excess of nutrients in the water? So maybe there's some pollution, or there's some agricultural fields, or there's a water treatment plant that or whatever, because some industry uses gets water from the river to cool down the machines and then releases it. So that might create an increase of temperature in the water ecosystem. So it has to be studied exactly what is causing it. But there are also some studies now some people are studying now the role of parasites, so of some fungi that that infect, let's say. My God, if they are looking at me and they are looking at this and I say something wrong, but anyway, their host, so the one that they infect is cyanobacteria.
Yeah.
So they are studying like how it affects cyanobacteria and if it potentially could be a way to fight them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One last question to answer.
Is there a situation?
So for the others that are not looking at the chat, is the situation with the blanket in ponds similar in Spain and in Europe? So I guess that means outside of Germany, right? Is it the same? I guess so, right?
Yeah.
Maybe because Spain is hotter.
So in Spain, I mean, it's still considered kind of the same range. We talk about temperate lakes. So like in this region we are. And yes, we can find it. I haven't never studied in Spain, but it does happen. And I've met people from Uruguay, for example, they're studying also Periphyton there in the Netherlands. I said before, like we were cleaning the Periphyton from the plants, so you get the real data from the plant and not plant plus algae. There are teams working on that in Denmark, in UK, in the US. So it happens everywhere because it's algae, and algae is in. I mean, even if you leave a bottle of water from the tap long enough, it depends on how the system clean the water and so on. But it can happen that you leave the water for a long time and algae starts growing. Or when you have an aquarium with fishes. If there are nutrients, some algae might come in the water with the fishes and so on, they start growing there. And actually, if anyone has had an aquarium, they know they have to clean the glass because something green grows. That's Periphyton, that's blanket. So it can happen anywhere in an ecosystem as far as there's water. The blanket will happen. I don't know exactly, actually I don't know if I know any team working exactly on that in Spain, but it happens everywhere.
Okay.
In the end, it's algae.
In the end, it's algae. It's a good. That's a good finishing.
The blanket is algae.
It's just algae. Oh, lots of questions also from YouTube. Cool. Thank you so much for your questions. I think Bonnie is gonna. I don't know if she already has. I'll post a link again to the survey. So if you could, there it is. If you could take a few. It doesn't take very long, I don't think. And fill that in and let us know how you like the event. The next Café Clutch is going to happen on the 1st of November. Very excited. That one's going to be in German. But we have a biophysicist with us because, we just talked about how physics blows our mind. He studies how, basically how bones heal and how blood vessels play into that. So he does biophysics and how all that works.
Wow.
I know. I'm already losing my mind over it, because I've never broken a bone or anything. Freaks me out, but he actually studies that in living individuals, he says, so not just people, I don't think.
That would be interesting for my grandma just broke one bone. So
oh no!
I don't know if she's looking there.
It's gonna be in German, so
I will listen to it and then I translate.
Oh yes, very good.
That sounds super interesting.
Yeah, I know, and we never had a topic like that before, and we never had a topic like yours before, so let's try to branch out,
Yeah, very, very different topics.
Yeah, I like to cover all areas.
Yeah, and also the previous videos are on YouTube, no? Like if people want to.
Yeah, we have one up with Vera who studies organoids. So she grows little miniature brains, and she calls them her brains. So her mini brains. So I see a trend here. Yeah, that's already on YouTube, and we have a few that are gonna be posted, and some in German, some in English, so there's going to be more to come, and I think this one too, so I'm excited. Maybe people that couldn't join today will be able to rewatch it. Yeah, thank you so much for everybody who joined us today. It was a lot of fun, lots of cool questions.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining. You have still some coffee, cold coffee now.
Yeah, super cold coffee, but it happens always like I'm too slow drinking coffee.
In German we say kalter Kaffee macht schön. Cold coffee makes you beautiful. I think that's just, don't waste it. Just drink it. It makes you beautiful.
Yeah, like it's still good. Go for
it's still good, yeah. So this is still good. Yeah, and again, thank you so much for joining today. It was so much fun, and I'm glad some of your family could join too.
No, you have to say it in Spanish.
Oh God, no. Please don't make me. Adios.
Sí, gracias a vosotras. Gracias.
Gracias. And see you next month. Bye.